which flavor yogurt is better?
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and as always you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. We do have one more team left in the team preview series of podcasts. We won't be getting to that today. It will be coming this week, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But what I'm going to do today is break it up a little bit. And we're going to have a mailbag pod, a solo pod with just me, no guests. As you can tell, my voice is a little crackly, so you'll have to make do with that for the duration of this show. But I asked for you guys to send through questions on Twitter, and you did. So I'm going to go and answer all those questions that you sent me. So
let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. Just a quick reminder again, Basketball Monster is open this season for memberships. There is a referral code option that isn't a discount code. It just does help us track where the new members are coming from. So if you listen to this podcast and you are becoming a Basketball Monster member, just type my name in, type Josh into that referral code, and enables us to track where the members are coming from for this season. So that's all that referral code refers to. Clearly, we've got a lot of stuff up on the site. I've got, I think, 4 punt guides up at the moment with another 2 that are written and ready to go up. So you see those up there. Kyle's got some fantastic articles. Matt's got his positional tiers stuff up there as well. And Kyle's actually going to be coming on the show tomorrow. And we're going to be going through his Eastern Conference rotation volatility article and talking about some of the issues there and what minutes might be sort of up for grabs as the season progresses. So we're going to talk about that in tomorrow's show. But today, as I said, it's all about the mailbag, all about the questions that you ask. And the first question comes from Lisa K. So big shout out to Lisa. Lisa's a huge fan of the show. I met her a couple of times over in the States when I was over there in July. And her question is, why do only 29 teams get team previews? Lisa, the Clippers are coming. I can assure you they are coming this week. They will be here on Thursday. The Clippers show will be coming out. So we're not forgetting you Clippers fans, especially you, Lisa. That show will be coming out. So rest assured that team preview. We just had some scheduling issues, but that will be coming out at the end of this week. So the Clippers show will be coming. The next question is from Nate Swan, who says, "What is the absolute best case scenario for Aaron Gordon's numbers this year?" It took me a while to think about this because how high can you get? Look, absolute best case. Could he average 20 and 10? Yeah, but maybe that's just pushing the levels of incredulity a little high. So what I thought was best case scenario, 17 points, 8 rebounds, 1.2 steals, 1.2 blocks, 1.5 threes, 50% from the field and 80% from the line. I think that's a realistic best case scenario. Again, I could come out and say he'd average 25 and 15 and get 2 blocks a game. That's anyone's best case scenario. I think this is a relatively realistic best case scenario for Gordon. 17 and 8 with 1.2 steals, 1.2 blocks, and 1.5 threes. A 1-1 guy with really good percentages. I think that's a realistic best case scenario that puts him in a top 50 player. He's getting drafted outside the top 100. I love getting him in the 70s or 80s. I think there's tremendous value in Aaron Gordon. He was a top 50 guy post All-Star break. Once Ibaka got traded and he was playing in his natural position, his percentages came up. And even in that stage, he wasn't actually shooting the 3 all that well. So he had room to improve and his defensive numbers could improve as well. So I'm pretty big on Aaron Gordon this year, but you don't need to take him at that best case scenario spot. At the absolute ceiling, you can get him in the 80s or 90s and still get significant value there. Jeff Padre says, when you're drafting, going in without a clear strategy, no punts and pure upside, who is the best to pick in the first round? Now, I don't know why you're going in with no strategy at all, because that's just a surefire way to screw up your draft. If you've got no strategy whatsoever, I'm not saying you necessarily need to pre-plan your punts, but what I'm looking at, if I know my draft spot, I've got multiple different strategies set up. Okay, well, if this guy comes here, what can then happen in the second round? What can I then do in the third round? I've got targets, and as we go down each round, my amount of targets expand in that time frame. So I might have, here's 2 guys I might get in round 1, or here's 4 options in round 2, and if I get these guys, it's like a tree diagram, and it comes down, so I might have 5 options in round 3, another 5 in round 4, and go through it that way. If you aren't looking to punt anyone, the best guy is going to be Kevin Durant with his across-the-board production, but this is only if you've got the first pick. Like, every selection you make in the first round is predicated on who goes ahead of you. So if you've got pick 5, you don't really have a choice of who the best player to pick is without any strategy. So there is no real clear answer to that. Every draft is different, and it all goes based on what happens with the players ahead of you. BC, that's Ben. He says, who's a good top 150 potential option for big man stats, point guard stats, and wing stats? Not asking for sleepers, just guys with the last pick who could stick. And I think I look at that as a definition of sleeper anyway. So however you want to define it, here's some guys who I think you can get with that last pick who have the ability to stick and maybe become top 120 or top 100 players. The point guard spot, Chris Dunn. Now, I'm going to talk about Chris Dunn a bit later. I don't think Chris Dunn's all that good, but he's got the opportunity here to get those assists and steals. And even if he becomes a Ricky Rubio level of shooter, that's better than what he was last season. So I think he's an interesting option. Pat Mills is another point guard that you can get there who's going to be playing an elevated role for the beginning of the season and might actually keep that role because Tony Parker's just not that good anymore. There's a lot of wings, so I'll talk about them in a sec. Bigs, I like Dwayne Dedman late, I like JaMychal Green late, and I like Johnny Collins from the Hawks late as well. Probably not as much as those other two guys, but Dedman's probably the number one guy that I like there with the last pick who I think can easily stick on a roster. And wings, you've got Bogdan Bogdanovic, you've got Chandler Parsons and Tyreek Evans, Jinglin Joe, Joshie Richardson, Terry Ross, Mo Harkless. All those guys with the last pick could easily stick on your team and have consistent value throughout the course of the season. JP Gale. Who are some players that could see a significant increase in three-point shooting categories, both three-point percentage and total made threes? That's a really interesting question, and it took a while for me to think about who those guys are, and it's not easy to predict that sort of stuff. The number one name that came into my head was Tim Mozgov, who doesn't really shoot threes at all, but we saw Brook Lopez taking 300-plus threes last year, and Mozgov keeps saying that he's going to take some threes, and I don't think he's going to take them to the level of what Lopez did, but I think he's still going to take some, so I think we see him improve his volume. Alex Abrines is going to get more opportunities, I believe, in Oklahoma City, so he's a guy, while his percentage was pretty good last year, I think his volume is going to increase. Jeff Teague.
My name is Jeff.
Now, he was a pretty decent shooter last year, but given the fact that the only way that he is better than Ricky Rubio, and he's worse than him in most other areas, but I think he's a better fit for the Timberwolves, is the fact that he's a better three-point spot-up shooter. So he might get a higher percentage of his attempts from three and be able to increase his three-point output, not necessarily his percentage, but I think that's an area that he could improve this season. Rocket Rodney Hood, just through sheer volume, should get more threes. Jay Crowder on a Cleveland team that's obviously very three-heavy, and he's sitting there, getting passes from LeBron, and LeBron whips open those corner three shots pretty easily, so I like Crowder. Andy Wiggins, for a similar reason to Teague, playing probably as a third offensive option behind Butler and Towns and having a lot of attention go to those guys. He's got the ability in his fourth season to increase his three-point percentage and his volume there as well. And Markieff Morris is another guy who I believe that will start to take more threes and maybe increase that percentage as well. So there's a group of guys who I do think will be able to increase their output efficiency-wise and total volume-wise in the three-point category. Dean Vasic says, what do you think about the new lottery reform with the bottom three teams getting an equal shot at the first pick? I love it. Should go further. Make the top six teams get an equal shot. Go on unweighted lottery. Doesn't bother me at all. I absolutely love this idea. And again, I think they could go harder at that. I've got plenty of ideas for lottery reform, but I think this is a great step in the right direction. And yeah, absolutely, I don't see any negative with it whatsoever. Matt Tuxey, what are some tips on engaging the league for the full season? Well, first of all, you got to get the right group of guys in the league. You're nearly always going to get someone that drops out at some point. You want to minimize that. And make that as late as possible in the season. There's a couple of ways you can do it. You can either make the team that finishes last, they have to pay double the entry fee, so it's $50 entry fee. If you finish last, you add an extra $50 in, especially if you're all just mates. That's an easier way. That's a good way of doing it. If it's a continual league, that the same guys come back every year, the teams that finish just out of the playoffs, so say you have 6 playoff teams, the team that finishes 7th or 8th, or however you want to do it, they get first choice of their draft pick next year. So the 7th team gets to pick where they draft. The 8th pick gets the second choice of draft spot that way. So those teams are fighting for something at the end of the season. This is obviously in non-dynasty leagues. The other option, which is not something I'm all that keen on, but it's something I thought of, is that whoever finishes last, if you do an auction draft the next year, they get $5 less in their auction. And I know that does make it harder for them, and maybe they finish last again, but it is, I guess, some sort of incentive to not finish last. I'm not 100% sure of that, but it is something that I thought of. Casey says, when to roll the dice on Embiid? I think that once you get into the 30s with Embiid, I'm pretty okay with that. In the second round is a little bit risky. Third round is fine. Into the 30s is a good spot. I'm feeling more and more confident with Embiid as the days go by. I'm getting a similar vibe with him that I got with Davis last year, and I was pretty confident that Anthony Davis was going to stay healthy last year. I didn't really base it on anything scientific. I just thought, you know what, I just think he's going to be able to play a decent amount of games, and it happened. Now, I'm not saying that I'm some sort of soothsayer in terms of games played for injury-prone big men, but I do believe that Embiid, I think he will play more than 50 games. I think he probably has a chance to get over 60 and maybe 65 games this year. And I don't think that the restrictions will be as harsh as what people think for as long as what people think. So I'm okay with him as a third round guy. The next question, Casey says, D'Angelo Russell or Jeremy Lin conundrum, who's the better pick? I think that, it depends on how you define better pick. I think that Russell probably finishes the season with the better overall rank, but Lin's ADP is 30 spots lower, so you can get more value out of getting him. And I don't think there's anything wrong with drafting both of those guys. You can get Russell at 60 and Lin at 80, and they both could finish as top 50 players. So I think that if it presented at pick 60 with a choice between the two, you take Russell, but then 2 rounds later, you might be able to get Jeremy Lin. In fact, someone tweeted me today, said, I'm in a 12-team standard league. Which of these free agents do you think is the best option? And I shit you not, the players on this free agent list, Jeremy Lin was on the list, Jamal Murray, Marquese Chriss, James Johnson, Dirk Nowitzki, Pau Gasol. Like, what the hell is this league? Like, what is going on with all these players, especially like Lin and Chris, who have got top 50 upside, are doing on the waiver wire? It was bananas. It made no sense to me at all. But it just goes to show you that people are sleeping on what Lin can do. If he's going undrafted and sitting on free agency in a 12-team league, and it's a sample size of 1, so it's not all that indicative of everything. But it was pretty bizarre for me to see that. Justin Gutterman, does anyone contend with Rubio for your fantasy boyfriend of the season? I feel like Nick Batum and Evan Fournier have dropped off. Maybe Marcus Smart or Bob Cove. Yeah, like Marcus Smart's definitely up there. Bob Cove is definitely up there. I'll throw 3 other names out there. The Blue Arrow, Lord Alfred Payton, and Gaz Harris.
Nice, Gary!
I think one of those guys might be. I think it could be Murray, but odds on I'd put it as Smart at this point. I'm pretty into Marcus Smart this season. I think he's a really good player who gets underrated by a lot of people. Carl Lesky, is Chris Dunn a bust, or was he mucked around his rookie year? Is he a big bounce back candidate? Let's talk about a few of those things. Is he a bust? It's too early to tell. Do I think he's good? No. Do I think he'll ever become good? No. But is he a bust? We don't know that yet. Was he mucked around his rookie year? No, not at all. He wasn't mucked. In fact, he was given opportunities that he did not deserve one little bit. He was put as the backup point guard all season when he was clearly the inferior player to Tyus Jones. So he was given a role that he did not deserve. He was given more playing time than he deserved. He was put into situations to grow his game and develop, and given every opportunity he was allowed, and was shit at them. Simple as that. So no, he wasn't mucked around at all. Is he a big bounce back candidate? Well, he's going to have that opportunity, but I just don't think he's that good. So that's why I like him as a last pick. But there's every chance that 3 weeks into the season, Jaren Grant is the starting point guard and Dunn is playing 20 minutes a night. That's a big chance there. So I don't believe he's good. I didn't believe he was that good in the draft last year. I said it at the time that he would have been the 6th or 7th point guard taken in this year's draft, and obviously that's still the case. He had a lot of age red flags, injury red flags, shooting red flags that were, when the NBA players came out last year and picked Chris Dunn for Rookie of the Year, and everyone was saying, oh yeah, Rubio's going to be traded. I openly scoffed at that on this podcast numerous times. I'm not a Chris Dunn fan, really at all. Now he plays for my Bulls, so that's awesome for me, of course. But I do think there is an opportunity for him to step it up this year. I'm definitely not writing him off, and I think he's a good last pick. The Mediterranean Marvel says, how confident are you in your favors projection? I get caught up in the won't have the same role even if he's fit, and the but Rubio made Pekovic good narratives. I think that where I'm projecting favors is almost not worst case scenario, but he's got significant room to get ahead of that. So taking him with a late pick, one of your third or second last pick, I think he's totally fine. I don't think he'll have the exact same role as what he had previously, but given the lack of offense on this team, he's going to move back into that starting power forward role, and he's going to play some significant minutes. I do think that there will be that concern there will be that concern that the Jazz do go smaller and stretchier, maybe playing Jonas Jerebko and Joe Johnson at the 4, so that's a little bit of a concern. I'm not putting too much stock into the Rubio made Pekovic good sort of a thing. Favors is already good, he doesn't need Rubio to make him good. It's really going to come down to health and the way that Snyder wants to play things, so I'm not putting too much stock in the Rubio thing, but I think that Favors is a really solid last pick. Adam King chimes in live. He says, can you rank both positional and statistical scarcity as the draft gets deeper? Which positions and cats are harder to find later in drafts? Well, the obvious one is points. Points are done after the first. You can see that on our Basketball Monster draft tracker. They're done after the first 20 picks. They become really red, which means they're really hard to find. Steals become easier to find late. Rebounds actually dry up a little bit as well, and that ties in with the scarcity of good centers also, and blocks become a little bit harder to find. You can find some assists later on, but all those other ones, they sort of fluctuate, but points is the big one that dries up really quickly, and if you're not competing in points and punting it, that's fine, but if you don't get high point scorers in the first 4 rounds, you're not competing in that category. It's as simple as that, because you just can't get enough guys later on reliably to do that. Adam Gould says, the center position in Phoenix. What's my thoughts about Alan Williams? My thoughts about Alan Williams is that he is not a starting caliber center in the NBA. He was a double-double guy last year. I don't think he can ever play 30 minutes a night. There's a lot of confusion in that rotation. Does Alex Len come back? What's Tyson Chandler going to do? Is Dragan Bender going to play at center, or Marquese Chriss? I don't think that Williams is worth a draft in standard leagues. He's worth watching to see what they do in that spot, and even in 23 minutes, he can be a useful guy, but it's more probably going to be in a streaming sort of situation. I just don't think that he is a great upside, high potential sort of a player. Miles Jameson. What are your feelings about Ivica Zubac in a dynasty league? Does he have upside starter potential? Yes, but not this year. I think that we'll see things change with the Lakers next year when Brook Lopez goes, so they can open up those 2 max slots. Now, they could also end up bringing Lopez back if they can't get Paul George and LeBron or DeMarcus Cousins, depending on who they're targeting with those spots. But if it all goes to plan and Lopez does move somewhere else, then I believe that Zubac will be the starting center. And I think he's got some nice upside as a top 100 player in the next 4 seasons, maybe 3 seasons or so. But this year, he's not going to provide very much at all. Miles also says, how much do you take into account positions when drafting? Do you always take the best player, or do you target positions in the first round? And I think positions are important. Talk about big men a lot, and if players are fairly equal, I would generally lean towards the big man. So it gives Towns, it gives Davis, it gives Jokic a little bit of a boost in that first round. And especially through the second and third round, I might reach a little bit for a big man. So I'm not a big LaMarcus Aldridge fan, but when you get to the 4th or 5th round, I'm like, I just need a power forward. I need some big rebounding numbers. I might need to get him. I might need to go a little bit earlier on Kevin Love or Blake Griffin or Yusuf Nurkic or Marcus Sol, just because I can get these centers who are at least reliable, and their playing time is going to be there. Bugsy Mogs says, who's winning the title this season? The NBA, we know. What about the AFL? I think you have to go in the AFL with Adelaide. Not just saying that because Matt is an Adelaide supporter. I think it has to be Adelaide at this point. Obviously, you've got some pretty interesting finals happening this week, as most people listening to this podcast have no idea what I'm talking about. But I would go with the Crows. Bugsy. Fantasy Noob, what are your tips for an auction with lots of experienced players? I'm thinking sleepers like Miles Turner will go high, and guys like Love and Lopez will be undervalued, or almost in general. Mr. Noob, the guys in that 20 to 50 range go undervalued pretty much all the time. So I think you're right. I think you'll get Love, Lopez, Gasol, Hayward, Conley. You get a lot of value on Eric Bledsoe, a lot of value on those players. Batum, Russell, Schroeder, all those guys get tons of value. Just because they're experienced players doesn't mean they all prescribe to the same theory. And in fact, majority of people will go with stars and scrubs, and they will pay over on those higher end players, leaving you with more money in the bank to attack those guys and grab 5 of those players ranked inside the top 30 and get them all at $10 discounts. So that's the way I like to do it. You might have someone else that's going with that strategy with you, and that's fine. That takes a little bit of the edge off it, but people still will look at it and go stars and scrubs a lot of the time. So that's the way that I will go. But yeah, look, guys like Gary Harris, guys like Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Miles Turner, who are like ludicrously low on their ADP numbers and default auction values in a league with experienced guys, they're going to go for similar to their value. But It doesn't mean that they're going to go for their actual value. They still might go $10 under, based on the fact that the top 10 guys all went $10 over what their actual value is. G-Funk throws another AFL question is, who would win a hard ball get between Daly and Dusty? Dusty. I think Dusty would smash him. Daly's tough. We know he dives on the ground for the ball. I think Dusty would steamroll him. What's your opinion, G-Funk, or anyone else who knows anything about the AFL? Has to be Dustin. Dustin Martin, that is, for Richmond. Dusty would smash him. I'm pretty sure. Pretty confident of that. Nathan says, are you expecting bounce-back seasons from Rocket, Rodney Hood and Derek Favors? What rounds would you target them? Yes and yes. You don't need to get them inside the top 100. They're available outside the top 100, so you're looking at around 10, 11, 12. Grab them there. And even if you miss one of them, there are tons of these guys in these late rounds that you can get. So I'd probably go Hood over Favors, but you don't have to go that high on either of those guys. TV Shaw says, is it feasible to not punt at all? Yes, you can win with any strategy. You can win not punting. It's not something that I like to do, but you can definitely win that way. So yeah, it is feasible to do that. Jonathan K says, what single category do you think is the best to build a punt around? What 2-category punt build is best? He says, don't include turnovers in either answer, please. Come on, Jonathan. Turnovers is the obvious one, but all right, I'll do as you say. Assists, I think, is the best to build around this year, just because it really does force you into getting those big men, especially in the middle rounds. You're not going to be as focused on point guards, and you can get steals from numerous other positions apart from point guards. It's trending away from point guards, that category at the moment. And if you want to go for a double punt, I like assists and free throws. You really get your big men up, get your DeAndres and Drummonds and Capellas, those sort of guys in those mid rounds. I think that's a strong one to go for. Just make sure you get some points early. Where are we? Michael. I answered that one already, Michael, so I won't go to that one. G-Bra. Are you worried by Marquese Chriss' Summer League performance? The added weight seemed to have stripped some athleticism. He was outplayed by Bender, from what I saw.
Bite my shiny metal ass.
Yeah, he didn't look good, and I'll continually say this, and people disagree with me. I don't think that Marquese Chriss is good. I don't think he will ever become a star player or even a really good player. But I do think that he's going to get every opportunity to play those minutes and put up the stats this season. So when you're talking about long-term value for Chriss, I'm not high on it. I don't think he's that good. I just think I don't think he gets it. But I think he's got a chance to average, I think he's legitimately got a chance to average a triple 1.5 this season. So I'm pretty okay with him for this year. But look, he looked fat. He looked like he had a fat ass in Summer League. He couldn't jump as well. But I'm still pretty okay with him, and I'm pretty big on him this season. I just don't love his long-term potential. Sam Philp, is there a draft pick that you consider being key to a successful draft? No, not really. No, you can make it work from anywhere. He said it appears the first 3 rounds are based on best player available. I would absolutely 100% disagree with that. That is not the way it goes. In the first round, yes, but again, if your picks aren't making sense with each other, like if you grab a point guard, and in the second round, the next best player is a point guard. In the third round, the next best player is a point guard. I think you're in a bit of trouble. You're not going to recover your field goal percentage, your blocks, your rebounds, and while you can punt all 3 of those, it gets really tough. So, no, best player available, it's not a good way to draft. It's best player available for your team based on what's already happened. And that's a different category rather than, again, as I say, best player available, might as well put your draft on auto draft then. And the computer will just take it based off rankings. It's not how it works. It's not the way you should do it. Planeta NBA. What happens with the center position in Toronto? Ibaka, Valanciunas, Nogueira, Poeltl, Dynasty and Redraft. All are usable. Yeah, they are. Jonas is going to start. Ibaka is going to play the 4. Ibaka is going to close at center. Poeltl is going to be the backup, and he might actually overtake Valanciunas at some point, and Bebe is way down the order at this point. I don't think there's really... I love Bebe, but the way that he was used at the end of last season gave me very little hope. I'm not a massive Poeltl guy in terms of his fantasy value, but I think that by the end of this season, there's a chance he could be playing 20 minutes a night. And Valanciunas, if he played 30 minutes a night, he'd be a top 50 guy. He's just never going to get that opportunity in Toronto, and he's probably going to be a mid to low 20s minutes guy this season. Hayden Dewar. Will CJ Miles and Norm Powell hurt each other's value? There's a chance of that. He said, or could they reach top 100 value each? Absolutely would be flawed if they both became top 100 players. I cannot see how that could happen at all. Would be stunned if they were both top 100 players. They could hurt each other's value. I think that Powell is able to push forward for that and show that he is a more valuable player than what Miles is, but there is that risk with both of them, and that's why you look at Powell as a last pick and you see how that plays out over the season's first 3 weeks or so. Ben Lumsden. Do you change the order of the top 8 picks you always refer to based on whether the league is 8 or 9 cat? Ben, I think everyone who's listening to this podcast knows the answer to this. No, because I give exactly zero shits about turnovers whatsoever. It does not change my evaluation of players in the slightest. So no, it is all, everything I talk about is 8 cat, and if I was in a 9 cat league, it would be the same because I pay absolutely no attention to turnovers, and I've gone through that, my reasoning for that multitudes of times. Miles Jameson, do you prefer dynasty leagues with daily or weekly lineups? Daily is always better, but I can understand why you go weekly sometimes. But daily is always a better option. Nick Barazio, what's the best second round pairing for the GOAT? And Nick, I know that you're talking about Nikola Jokic there, so I'd like to go with a high scoring point guard who's not necessarily a high assist guy like Kyrie Irving. Dame Lillard would be a really interesting pairing with Jokic there. Get that 25 to 28 point per game scorer. Get those bulk threes up there as well. Yeah, look at those guys as a punt blocks pairing. That'd be the way I'd be going with Jokic there. ZZZ or ZZZ or Z, I don't know how to pronounce your name. 12 team head-to-head 9 cat league, Kawhi or Anthony Davis? Davis, simple, straightforward. Let's go. Will, do you lean towards any specific punt category pairing? I've talked about that already, Will. Sorry about that. Ben Cook, what team situation scares you the most? It seems like Sacramento is a dead man fantasy basketball land. There's value everywhere, Ben. And Sacramento might look like that, but George Hill has value at his ADP. Bogdan Bogdanovic could be a surprise. Bud Hield could jump inside the top 100. Willie Cauley-Stein could be a top 60 challenger. Skal Labissiere with the last pick is really solid as well. So there's value with all these guys. And while they probably don't have anyone who's any hope to be a top 40 player, although George Hill has been that before, there is a lot of value in those Sacramento guys anyway. Even Chicago, as shitful as they are, Chris Dunn might provide something. You might get Nikola Mirotic put together a top 60 season. You might get Chris Felicio become a top 200 deeper league sort of a player. Denzel Valentine might become a top 120 guy if he's given the minutes. Zach LaVine in the second half of the year might be a top 30 guy. There is value in all of these situations. You just got to be able to use it properly. Scott Abelek says, which backup point guard is likely to have the biggest fantasy impact this season? I think that's a really interesting question. And I'm going to go with Milos Teodosic. For the Los Angeles Clippers, I think that they should probably start Teodosic, but I'm pretty sure that they won't. His ability to get 6, maybe 7 assists per game, steals and threes, and be relatively efficient and decent scorer, even in a backup role, gives him value. There's other guys, though. We could have Derrick Rose, Ish Smith, Pat Mills, Jaren Grant, Delon Wright, and Corey Joseph, but I would give the nod to Milos at this point. Tone the Shrimp. Where did the sexy boy nickname for Sean Kilpatrick, Sean Long, come from? Well, unfortunately, I'm not going to be saying Sean Long or Sean Kilpatrick's name all that often this season, but I'm sure most people listening to this podcast would know that's the theme song for this sexy boy, Shawn Michaels, from the WWE/WWF, and that's where it came from. Simple as that. It's the name Sean, sexy boy, Shawn Michaels, Sean Long, Sean Kilpatrick. Anyone who's got the name Sean is going to be referred to as sexy boy from now on. NBGRCK, I'm going to say N Big Rock, who knows. Cousins or Gobert as a late first round pick, head-to-head 8-cat. I would take Cousins there. I value that scoring more. I know the blocks can be valuable, but I've talked about how hard it is to get scoring, so I would take Cousins, but I don't think there's really a wrong answer there. Fantasy Noob is back again. In standard Yahoo leagues with a 2-center requirement, which I absolutely cannot stand. It is bullshit. It is the most ridiculous rule. They have 2 centers, especially considering the center position is almost becoming extinct in the NBA. To have a 2-center requirement is laughably bad. If you're going to have two positions, have 2 point guards. Like, you're more likely to have lineups with 2 point guards on a court in the NBA than 2 centers. It's ridiculous. He says, I usually roll with a minimum of 4 centers. Is having only 3 centers unadvisable, or is it okay if I'm punting field goal percentage? You probably do need to have 4 center eligible players to fill those 2 active spots. You look for some power forward center combination guys. 3, I think it leaves you the risk of having open active roster spots. So I think that 4 is probably the way to go. Yogi Ferrell, not the real Yogi Ferrell. Oh, also, quick shout out to Lance Thomas, who I found out that follows me as well. So another NBA player on board. Yogi Ferrell, best beard in the NBA other than Harden. It's Mirotic. Has to be Nikola Mirotic. Unless there's someone I'm missing. Evan Fournier's got not a bad beard, but I'm going to go with Mirotic. Fanty McFantasy Face. We score free throws made in 2 of my dynasty leagues. You know what you should do? Get rid of it. It is a shit category. It is a horrendous category. It's you know what a free throw made is? Fanty. It's a point, and you know where you get points counted? In points. So you're literally double dipping. I hate that category. Anyway, out of the top rookies, who is going to be the best at getting to the line? Simmons, Den Smith, Fultz, and Johnny Collins. I think they're the guys who I've got projected for the most free throw attempts per game for this season. Unbreakable says, Tyreke Evans is worth a punt after 100. There is pretty minimal competition for minutes at shooting guard and small forward in Memphis. Absolutely. Love Tyreke late. You could run that second unit, could average 5 assists a game and 15 points. Yeah, I love that pick. Next question. Gabriel says, is Rose the best point guard we've ever seen? Now, I know that you are a Rose troll. I know that you are a Rose... I don't know. I was going to say you've got rose-coloured glasses and didn't even mean that to be a pun, but it is going to be a pun. Is he the best point guard we've ever seen? Well, I guess that would make you the best tweeter we've ever seen. So the answer to both of those is no. Nathan, tips for an offline draft with everyone in the league present, apart from not drinking too much. You got to have someone who's keeping a track of everything. So we have one person designated to writing all the picks down, and probably preferably have it done on a board so that a big board, people are up there writing the picks so people can see who's been taken. That's probably the number one thing to do. The next thing is make sure you give shit to everyone who makes a pick. Oh, and give once they make the pick, every negative you can possibly think about that player. Just as much shit given as possible. It's the best thing about doing an in-person draft is just heaping shit on your mate. So that's exactly what you have to do. Mediterranean Marvel says, how low is too low to grab Isaiah Thomas in a roto league with or without IR? I wouldn't want to grab him inside the top 40, but in a roto league, you've got a little bit more. It doesn't really matter if you've got IR or not, because in a roto league, you sit those guys on the bench and you don't have to play them. Remember, you've got 82 game limits for your active spots, so the bench basically is injured reserve. You only move those bench guys into active spots when one of your starters gets injured. You're not rotating those guys in every single day. So I think that outside the top 40 is fine. Marcus Aurelia says, a deep points league where threes are overweighted. Must choose one keeper for the next 2 seasons. TJ Warren, Scalabissiere, or James Johnson. Threes overweighted. Johnson's going to hit the most of those threes. And I think for the next 2 years, I would lean towards him. If it was any longer, I would take TJ Warren, but I'll take Johnson out of those 3 guys. And to finish things off, we've got Blizzard Nuts, who says, Chandler Parsons, worth a 13-round grab? Yes. And I've seen many people who are your sleeper picks or who not to draft Chandler Parsons, don't draft him ever. It is bullshit advice. Don't ever follow it. You don't have to take him with that pick, but who is available at pick 152 who has got multiple top 50 seasons on their resume 2 seasons ago? Dreadful last season, no doubt about that. But if he is healthy, and we talked about the lack of players on this Memphis team with Tyreke earlier, he can become a top 70 guy. So why wouldn't you take him there? And if it turns out at the start of the season he's not healthy and he looks terrible again, out you go, and you grab someone else. No problem with grabbing it. It literally doesn't cost you anything to grab him with that last pick. And unless people are just being petty and like, oh yeah, he was shit last year, too much Instagram modeling, can't take him, then why wouldn't you just pick him? Like, there might be other guys there. Tyreke might be there, Chris Dunn might be there, and I understand that, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with grabbing Chandler Parsons with your last pick, because the upside is significant, and that is everything that you should be doing with that last pick in the draft, as I say quite often. All right, that does it for today's mailbag show. Lots of questions. Going to have Kyle back on the show tomorrow. We're going to talk about his article about the Eastern Conference rotation. So we'll go through all of that tomorrow. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, and Spotify, and leave a review. 5 stars is always the best way to go. It helps me out a lot, so make sure you do that, and check out the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Yogi Ferrell.